Thank you. Bridges Live presents You Be the Judge every Wednesday at 6 p.m. We have a great show about information, understanding, and action. You Be the Judge is hosted by myself, Dr. Paul Dyer, and my two beautiful co-hosts, Marylin Pierre, who's running for Circuit Court Judge of Montgomery County, Maryland, and Judge Claudia Barber. For those of you who are supporting any of our candidates, like Marylin Pierre for Circuit Court Judge Montgomery County, send money. Moving on from there. After that, we have a special guest that we're going to bring on, but I do want to share something that is pertinent to the things that we're going to hear. So I'm going to do this right now. Can everyone hear? Let's see.
In the death of a Montgomery County public school student,
Can everyone hear that?
Jalen Jones' mother tells us her son was the root that tied her family together. And tonight, the search is on for.
Can anyone hear that? Can you all hear it?
Yeah, the audio is not that good.
Okay.
For me, anyway.
And for the rest of you, it's not that good either?
Do you want to send it to me? Do you want to send a link to me and I'll try to set it up?
Let's see if I can do that here.
Because you could put it in the chat.
I'll do that, right. So what we're trying to show here is there's a Montgomery boy that was recently found who had been missing. The shortness of it is we have no facts about the why, okay, and that has it causes me disturbance. And then we also have another. So far it put a self-inflicting wound on a mayor in Hyattsville, Maryland, which is in Prince George's County. And that is supposed to be self-inflicted, and that seems suspect. Because I had recently spoke to Kevin Ward, who's the mayor, last week to have him come on the show, You Be the Judge. And we also know that another friend of ours, David Grogan, who's running for Prince George's County Sheriff, who also spoke to him last night, and that he was going to endorse Dave Grogan. And so, and all of a sudden, X hours later, he's dead by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. You know, I'm not a forensic scientist. Does something shady, you know, and it smells disgusting to me. And that bothers me, because when we talk about You Be the Judge, we want to give information so you can have an understanding. These are the information we have, but we have no understanding. As Miss Miner was talking about, her son was killed by police officers, and they power washed the ground before investigators got there. She's been asking for how many years now, Miss Miner, to get your
7. October will make 8. 7 years.
7 years. She's been asking for findings about the death of her son, and there has been no answers. Not even a lie told to Miss Miner. She has received no answers. That's a little bit shady when it comes to the issues that way. When you have received no answers, it's a problem. If you received a lie, at least we can challenge the lie. But when you get nothing, it's still. Marilyn, were you able to get that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you.
No. So go ahead, pull that up, Marilyn, and then we'll go from there, because then we'll get to our guest. Go ahead, Marilyn.
Oh, sorry. I don't know why it went to. Okay, hold on.
That's okay.
Start over again, because I forgot to share.
Judge Claudia Barber has just entered. That my other co-host, beautiful Judge Claudia Barber. We have been talking about Judge Barber, about Kevin Ward, the self-inflicted wound, the found boy in Germantown, Maryland, the 17-year-old boy who the mother had said he was missing. We do know a couple of things from what she said, that he was bullied, the school knew about it, and yet there was nothing done, and then we find her dead. This really goes to our candidate that's actually on our guest, who's Bernice Maricu North. She's running for state's attorney's office in Montgomery County, and these things fall right under her privy about the information and how she would perceive and things like that. We'll be hearing from her sooner than later. Judge Barber, how was your week before we get rolling?
Fine. I don't believe our topic last week was entirely fully dealt with, but it's still on my mind. So, you know, all criminal justice and judicial matters are all a part of this, which is why I enjoy co-hosting the show every week.
Yeah, it's just been a mess, hasn't it? And then things just roll down here. Marylin, you got it? You're on mute, Marylin. That damn mute button.
New developments tonight in the death of a Montgomery County public school student. Jalen Jones' mother tells us her son was the root that tied her family together. And tonight, the search is on for the person who killed him. His body was found along Grotto Lane, just off Great Seneca Highway, Monday afternoon. Tonight, Jones' mom told News 4's Shamari Stone she believes her son was bullied at school.
The principal of Northwest High School sent a letter home to parents describing Jalen Jones as having a large personality, an infectious smile, and an overall amazing spirit.
Jalen was like he was the life of our house. He always kept us laughing.
Alexis McDaniel mourns over the loss of her only son, 17-year-old Jalen Jones. Montgomery County police detectives searching the woods with flashlights to find evidence. Police say someone murdered him.
I'm hurt. We hurt. The family, and my family's hurt.
The Northwest High School student's body was found in this wooded area near this creek out here in Germantown Monday at 3 p.m. after someone reported it to police.
We don't know what he did to deserve that type of treatment.
She tells me her son was bullied at the school. In all fairness, you don't have any proof that that could be associated with your son's homicide?
I mean, I just think there's a stigmatism surrounding him.
And there is another question. According to this National Center for Missing and Exploited Children flyer, Jalen was last seen in Germantown on January 7th.
That's not true. That's something totally separate.
She tells me the last time she saw him was Friday, January 21st. The medical examiner will determine the exact cause of death. Meanwhile, police are investigating to try and determine who killed Jalen and why.
Whoever did this, you have broken my heart.
The principal of Northwest High School says that grief counselors are available to help students deal with this tragedy. I'm Shamari Stone in Montgomery County, News 4.
Now, we reached out to Montgomery County Public Schools tonight about Jones' mother's bullying allegations. We're waiting to hear back. Police want to hear from anyone with information about this murder.
That's awful.
Well, now that we're kind of focused on the Montgomery County State's Attorney's race, one question I have has to do with award monies that are offered on some cases and not others. I didn't hear that in this case, and I was curious as to how that works in jurisdictions. And I'm kind of posing that question to the candidate.
Bernice.
Can we start off a little bit slower and work our way into that, because she still hasn't been introduced yet or even announced by name. Dr. Dyer?
Yo, go ahead. Please just, well, you could do the introduction, please. But because I'm having a little bit of, go ahead.
I will do a quick introduction. And before I do that, I see that Wilbur Friedman is on there. And everybody, tomorrow is Wilbur's 90th birthday, so we want to sing him happy birthday sometime during the program. So we're saying that before we admit him. Where is he? He is no longer with us. You know?
There he is. There he is. I see him.
I don't see him.
Look under Nancy
Oh,
Miller.
yes, there. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So anyway, not now, but sometime around. It is my pleasure to have Bernice Miracle Dorf here. She is a candidate for Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office, and she is a fabulous young go-getter. She is very intelligent. She has how should I say, she has that spark about her, and she does a lot of community service. And I'm not just saying that because she is a fellow Bison. We both went to Howard University School of Law, and in the Bisons, we all stick together, through thick and thin. But I could honestly say that Bernice is just a wonderful, wonderful young woman, and she has a very, very promising future. And she needs to go ahead and just grab that future. So Bernice, if you want to give yourself a more comprehensive introduction, please go ahead.
Sure. Well, thank you all for having me on today, and thank you for joining the Zoom to hear a little bit more about me and my candidacy. So a little bit about myself. I am a child of African immigrants. My parents came from Ghana and West Africa, but I basically was raised in Montgomery County most of my life. I went through the public school system here in Montgomery County. And then thereafter, I graduated from the University of Maryland in College Park with a government politics degree. And then I went on to, as Marylin mentioned, Howard University School of Law, where I got my Juris Doctor in 2006. After law school, I clerked for 2 judges in DC Superior Court and then in Prince George's County Circuit Court. And I started my career thereafter as a prosecutor. Why I chose the lane of being a prosecutor really comes from my own upbringing. When I was growing up, we definitely didn't have the safest neighborhood. It became safer over time, but definitely was told about tales of drug trafficking and drug raids and things of that nature. And I've seen my own issues of gun violence in the community. So those experiences really shaped my passion to keep communities safe, especially for kids. Because when I was a kid myself, where I saw an episode of gun violence. So that really catapulted me into the field of prosecution. But when I started as a prosecutor, which was in Anne Arundel County State's Attorney's Office, I learned right away that the system is not meant for everyone, right? Not just for everyone. And that really ate at me, because that's not what I signed up for initially as a young prosecutor. I remember seeing people get unfair sentences just based upon their financial circumstances or their ethnicity. And that really left an impact on me. And when I left the office to go into the private sector, it really was with the passion of trying to affect change outside the field of prosecution. Because I thought, oh, the traditional way of prosecution is never going to change, right? But fast forward a few years later, and we are in an era right now where we're willing to really disrupt the system. To put it mildly, and to be upfront, we're willing to disrupt the system because we're tired of it, and it's literally killing us. It's really destroying communities and destroying Black people and brown people. It's time that we make a change, and there is a growing effort, at least in Montgomery County, to try to effectuate that change. So most recently, I chaired a task force called the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force in Montgomery County, where we had a chance to come up with 87 recommendations on police and public safety reform. And it was really during that time where I really crystallized the division of what was happening among the community and the status quo. And I really felt that it was time for a new vision of justice in Montgomery County. The status quo was just not in step with this cry for restorative justice, for healing, thinking outside the box beyond traditional methods of prosecution. And that's something I've always believed in, just as a lawyer, as a Bison trained lawyer myself. And given my experience in the community prior to my role in the task force, where I served as the co-chair, I also led a local advisory group for about 6 years in Silver Spring, who, as you probably heard in the news, has had its share of violence in downtown Silver Spring. So that coupled with, my most recent role on the task force really led me to think, okay, this is something that I'm ready to do. I've always been interested in going back to public service, and as a private practitioner right now, I definitely know that the business of trying to run an office. So the managerial aspect is not going to be an issue for me. I think this is a welcomed opportunity for me to mesh my experience in the private sector as a line prosecutor, as a community leader, to really reimagine or reinvent how this office is going to be in Montgomery County, because it's going to be a lot of change. And I've seen change as a prosecutor in Anne Arundel County. I've seen change. I think I was under 3 administrations in Anne Arundel County. So I definitely have experienced the massive change that can occur when you have a new leader in office. But I care very much about Montgomery County and the state of Maryland and keeping everybody safe. But we have to do it such that we're not perpetuating the school to prison pipeline. We have to do it such that we're not perpetuating racial bias. And it's going to take a person with a new vision of justice to do that. You can train somebody so many times, but if you don't have that personal experience, if you don't have that heart for change, the words are just going to be words. And we deserve better in Montgomery County. So that's one of the core reasons why I decided to run. And I can go into my policies and stuff, but I really wanted to hear from all of you and try to answer some of your questions.
Go ahead.
No, I really was going to say thank you, Bernice, for talking about that. But let's go right into what you heard the question from Judge Claudia Barber, right? So, so just really jump right in there.
Right. Well, from my experience, the award money is usually handled by the police department, or if there's a family that wants to put more money into that pool. And I say that from actually my own personal experience. What I don't often share is that my father most recently is a gun violence survivor, which I guess thereby makes me and my family a gun violence survivor. And no one put up money to find the shooter. He's still at large. So there's other stories where you've heard the situations where people are putting up money to find the accused, or to find the killer, or to find the shooter. But it really depends upon what money is out there from at least the family or from the police, but primarily the family. And we don't come from money, so we're not going to be able to put up any money to find the killer and I'm sorry, the shooter in my father's case. But that's my understanding of the traditional way of getting the award money to make an arrest. If that was your question, I hope I got that.
Well,
question
yeah,
right.
it goes deeper than that, because there are unsolved murders. And if law enforcement has any role, any pot, any monies that they could spare to offer an award on some of these unsolved mysteries or unsolved murders, some lead, etc. We already know that police generally have a wealth of resources to use to find people, but sometimes it requires community engagement. Sometimes that's silent, but just like we heard that clip in Montgomery County about a teenager that was killed, shot dead, and there was nothing about a reward being offered to solve that murder.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That goes to how we treat these crimes. I mean, depending on one's socioeconomic status and one's ethnic background, and that really unfortunately what it comes down to, and that's part of the frustration I remember feeling.
Hold on, Bernice, I am cutting you off. What did you just say? It depends on who is shot. If it comes down to the issue of who is shot and how they report it and how it gets done, are you saying this? Remember, you're running for state's attorney, and as Black folk say this, we've been saying this for years. White people don't want to hear that mess talking about it's because they don't. Moderate whites really don't want to hear it because it seems very foreign to them. But yet you're saying, as a person running for state's attorney, that it really depends on who is shot. That's
Oh, I'm not saying that's the accurate way of doing
right,
it. I'm saying
right.
it has happened.
It has happened. Right. So far, thus far, from what we know in history, that is what has happened. That is amazing for you to say that and still run for office, because that shows your strength. Because does that take away your ambition? Does it add to it? Or are you still look at things in a judgment way because you still have to prosecute these issues?
Essentially, when these cases come upon the state's attorney, everyone should be treated equally. Everyone. It doesn't matter if you cannot speak English. It doesn't matter if you are the CEO of a company. I'm seeing that in Montgomery County as we speak. I'm seeing situations where some of these victims are not getting calls right away, right? Because they might not be of a certain class. I'm seeing it as we speak, and it's frustrating that this continues to go on. The disproportionate treatment of how cases are being handled based on certain communities. It's aggravating, it's frustrating, and that's not my principle. Being from an immigrant background to be luckily working hard to become a Juris Doctorate and to be a lawyer. I've seen all spectrums of socioeconomic class. I've seen a diversity of cultures. And the one great thing about Montgomery County, me growing up in Montgomery County, is that I'm able to embrace that diversity and treat people as people and not just who I know and what golf, we call it not golf club, but what club I belong to with this particular person. Everyone should be held accountable for their actions, and everyone should feel like victims, because even if, let's say for instance, a murder, the person is deceased, the family is still suffering, the community is still suffering, and they need just as much attention, if not more, to make sure they're going through this without completely losing their mental health, because it's devastating. On the outside, a lot of people, especially people of color, like to feel like everything's okay. But it's not, right? It's not always okay. And that's something that we struggle with culturally, that I'm very aware of, being an African-American and being a child of African immigrants. So yeah, treating everybody the same and how we're doing these cases is critical. And that's something I'm going to impart into the line prosecutors that I oversee when I become a state's attorney.
Well, I'm not going to take up all the time, but I've got a lot of loaded questions. And one of the questions I have a concern, well, you've already answered one with a loaded answer, and that is, it depends on who is shot.
Right.
That should blow everybody off.
Right.
So, Bernadette put something in the chat that says that the Brandon Institute at New York University has a research or some report that confirms what you were saying in terms of it depends on who the victim.
I read that report.
Okay.
And the issue we have is who reads the report, and does it ever make it into a judgment or people who care enough to do something about it? Because it's nice that the report, it's not actually it's sick and sad that the report has to be done. The report was done, there were findings, and yet people still go like there's no issues whatsoever in the world. And it goes back to something you said earlier in our shows, Marylin, who's running for circuit court judge in Montgomery County. This will come across your desk too, as she's prosecuting Miss Bernice, and it comes across your desk. This is an issue that you would have to deal with. And you have seen where a child took $46 and was sentenced to 10 years in prison, in jail for $46. Now, come on, right? I know other people have questions. Anyone have questions before?
Well, I'd like to also add that there's a concern also about the effectiveness of state's attorneys, because all of these, from law enforcement to the prosecution to the bench, all of them intertwine when it comes to criminal justice. All of them make up criminal justice. And to the extent that the prosecutor is one of the gatekeepers to prosecuting bad police officers, writing up reports that are faulty, writing up reports that are just downright wrong, writing up reports that, don't reflect what happened, and not being prosecuted for that, causing people to go to jail, and have wrongful convictions. There have been Maryland defendants that went to jail for wrongful convictions and were actually, if it wasn't for the Innocence Project, they would have still been going on in jail right now. And we were concerned about how many things have happened in Anne Arundel County. That's one of my counties. For example, in the case of Tyreek Hudson, who was murdered, his assailant got a plea bargain, and there wasn't an aggressiveness by the state's attorney to hire an independent medical expert to challenge the public defender's expert to take an Alford plea or some type of plea with this defendant who shot the man dead. And it was one of those cases where the deceased was denied a protective order. And after he was denied a protective order, he was shot dead by a white man. And this person was able to take a plea not criminally responsible. They didn't let that happen for that Capitol Gazette murder. They went all the way up to the nth degree and hired their own little expert. I'll say it. Yes, they did. And to the extent that that type of disparity in prosecution, if you will, happened, a lot of folks are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And they want to see people run for office, but, stand behind what they're running for. And they see the disparity and they want to fix it, not keep it the same.
Bernice, you have a statement on that?
Well, regarding getting the experts, I think that's important to, if there is a question of truthfulness, of lack of accountability, I think that needs to be explored as much as possible. If there's someone else saying, hey, look, are you sure we're making the right decision by doing this NCR plea, and someone's suggesting, hey, we should get a third expert, something like that, that needs to be explored and not shut down. And if it is shut down, it has to be a good, thorough reason, because you are electing the state's attorney, you being the voters. It's not an appointed position by a county executive. It's not appointed by the governor. The voters should be holding the state's attorney accountable. And that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in creating sort of community advisory board within the office to make sure the office is on top of what the community is looking for in terms of public safety. And that results in maybe changing the process in which those pleas are being done, then that's fine. But it has to be community driven.
Bernice, I think that is as good as it sounds. I think it's a rabbit hole, and I'll tell you why. Because we know in Montgomery County, the largest county in Maryland, with all these rich white people, they start screaming at the office, talking about the taxpayers, this and that. How can you defend off those wolves? Do you become transparent enough to say, we have realtors, developers, and special interest groups calling my office, demanding for X, Y, and Z, and yet you're still want to maintain, I want the truth, I'm going to prosecute the way I prosecute, and I don't need your money. Is that something that you're able to say as a state's attorney, or do you give it out to the people saying, this is what I'm getting, but this is what I'm doing? Can a state's attorney do that?
Well, ultimately, the state's attorney has to make the decision that it's going to impact, how to keep our community safe. What I'm suggesting is including community input into that fold, but ultimately, the state's attorney has to make the decision. That's why the state's attorney is elected, right, to help the voters make decisions on which cases to prosecute and what to go forward on to ensure safety for our citizens. Now, with respect to influences by developers and whatnot, I'll tell you a little story, which really is referring to how I worked with police when I was a line prosecutor. Several times I would not go forward on cases because I didn't feel that what they were doing is right, despite, you know, the popular trend of, okay, well, just go forward with it or just try it. And I went and tried because I didn't think that was appropriate use of our resources. And I remember getting some pushback from that. But at the end of the day, the officers did better. None of them did the mistake that I pointed out to them. So, you know, I've made tough calls before that are not popular, that for the sake of the community, I made those decisions in light of all the circumstances before me. So that's kind of the leadership that you're going to see when I'm elected into that position. It's not just about cut and dry, here are the facts, here's what I'm going to go forward on, let's go prosecute, try to get jail. It's really what's best for the community, what's really the root cause of the issue, and how to address that. So that's kind of philosophy that I'm going to preach. So whoever is trying to influence me, as long as I stick to that philosophy, then I'm good. And I've had that tunnel vision in the past, and I continue to have that tunnel vision for going forward.
Okay, so someone asked the question, what's the Innocence Project? Innocence Project is an organization that was formulated, and they really do clinical work where they, by the way, one of the other onerous issues that comes up when you're talking about the criminal justice system, it was not designed for poor people. Now that is something that all of us know. Everybody in the whole world knows that.
Not true.
And, you know,
not true.
And
I don't think everyone knows that. I don't think everyone knows that. I have been lambasted to understand in these times, not everyone knows what you know, Judge Claudia Barber. And I had thought the same thing, like, why don't people ask questions? How can people not be so inquisitive? How can people not do the research? Well, I've been taken over and raked over the coals because I thought the same thing. And I tell you, I don't understand it either, Judge Claudia Barber. I don't, but not everyone knows. Not everyone knows.
Okay, I accept that. Not everyone knows. All right, so to the extent that, well, actually, I just completed about an hour before this program, actually 2 hours before this program began tonight, the podcast began tonight. I was I was participating or watching rather as a guest or as a member of the National Association of Women Judges, a webinar they had done on racism and this racism disparities. And of course, they used a lot of statistics, but they specifically brought up the fact that the system is that there's disparate treatment in sentencing, but they also brought up the fact that there's disparate treatment based on how much you have and poor people. The one thing that the Sentencing Project, which is another similar organization as the Innocence Project, what they did was they did a lot of research, and they see that there is selectivity in diversion on whites as opposed to Blacks. Another point that came up at the seminar today, geographically, there are many states with a greater than 9-to-1 incarceration rate of Blacks versus white. And the states with the highest ratio that's greater than 9-to-1, includes California, Connecticut, Iowa, Maine, New Jersey, and Wisconsin. Wisconsin's rate is, New Jersey's rate is 12-to-1. So you have a lot of states that are just okay with that. And, there's no unction to change that thing, and you see these incarceration rates are that disparate. And you also see with your naked eye, if you're in the system, the selective diversion of whites versus Blacks and how they get lighter sentences. That, there was one woman on the panel in this webinar who is a lawyer now, but she had to go to jail for 4 years for a marijuana crime, which she said she did not commit. And because it was a mandatory federal sentence, she got acquitted of a lot of the charges, but she had to, the mandatory minimum was like 5 years, and she served about 4 years of that. And you think about all the folks that are different races that are not incarcerated for something for that type of offense. It's offensive, but it's also, the disparity is outrageous and it's insulting.
Holly, you have a question. You're on mute. I'm gonna.
Okay, I'm trying to bring in all the aspects. I mean, I think whatever you can say, probably more and more people are learning about the disparity. So the real question is, what do we do about it? And I think that that's really what we should be addressing. I wanted to ask Bernice if she's been in other candidates forums and got the sense that other people running for state's attorney were interested in this subject as much as you. I mean, in addition to you. Is this a common question that's discussed and addressed?
No, it's not. We've had a few forums on. We had a forum on marijuana legalization. We had and the rest of the forums have been focused on particular districts in Montgomery County, based upon geographical interest. So the actual overall issue that we're talking about hasn't really been delved into as much, because as I'm hearing Judge Barber, I said, oh, wow, yes, exactly. Like, these are things I want to talk about, but I haven't had the opportunity to discuss them, like the diversions and like because what I would argue distinguishes me from the rest of the pack is that I'm really talking about dealing with the problem at the beginning stages, not waiting until jail is the last option on the table. That is the traditional mentality of reform-minded prosecution in Maryland. Let's have another diversion court, which are good tools. When we're talking about really tackling the heart of the issue, we got to start before there's even the discussion of what to charge, right? Do we really need to charge this particular crime, or are there community resources instead to resolve the problem? Is there more restorative justice means of handling the situation, like through mediation? But that should be done through analysis, whether it's hiring a social worker to assess the situation, whether it's hiring a data analyst to kind of get a sense of, look, why are all these police arrests for trespass in a particular neighborhood? Like, really delving into that so we can kind of look back and say, okay, there's a problem here. What's really going on, instead of us just pushing paper and pushing these cases out and perpetuating the problem. The root cause of mass incarceration really starts with what is being charged and to whom. It's very crucial. I mean, I just had a potential client, but not even a potential client, because she actually absconded, but she got charged with theft, felony theft, employee theft. And she is an immigrant, and fortunately, she hasn't been in the country too long. And so, yeah, I mean, I think if it was a misdemeanor, she probably was not freaked out. I mean, this is just my theory, right? But it's about what happens when that charge comes out. Felony theft, clearly that's a red flag, at least in the immigrant community, that deportation is down the line, right? Because it's crime moral turpitude. Mm-hmm. But why was that the only charge? This is not Montgomery County, it's another jurisdiction, but that's what I'm talking about. Like, really tackling the root cause of the issue starts at that level that none of the candidates are talking about. They're not. And if they are, it's because they heard it from me. They heard it from me. I'm serious.
Well, I think part of what I see in the state's attorney's offices that I deal with is that win-lose mentality, that they want to win, and so therefore the other person has to lose. And I'm glad you brought up the idea of the felony theft, because last month I actually represented this young woman who was accused of doing something, and they said that they saw her do it on the video. They sent the video to me, and clearly there was nothing on the video that shows that she stole a co-worker's purse. So I kept on harassing, I'll use the word, harassing the state's attorney's office and say, could you please drop this? Could you please dismiss this because you cannot prove your case? And I went on and on and on because this was having such a traumatic effect on my client. She doesn't have her papers. So that, and this caused her to lose her job. She had to find another job, and this was just hanging over her head, and she was not happy about it. To make a long story short, I could not get them to dismiss the case. Even on the date of the trial, we show up to court, and I said, you cannot prove the case, you need to dismiss it. And she said, well, your client could agree to put this on the step docket and stay away from the victim. And I'm like, why would I do that? Why would I leave this hanging over her head when you have no proof? And of course, the second time that the case was called, she then dismissed it because she knew that she could not prove it. But my point being that she did that because she wanted a win in her column. And it didn't matter that she had no proof. It didn't matter that my client did not do what she was accused of doing. It didn't matter that my client had to go through all this trauma. She just wanted that win at all costs. And this is not seeking justice. It's just so frustrating because sometimes you sit there in the courtroom and you see so many people taking guilty pleas because it's the easier thing to do at the time.
Marylin,
and they don't recognize how this comes to bite them later. And I'm so glad that there are people like Bernice who are looking into the system and saying, we like the system that we have, but there has to be vast improvement because not everybody is seen the same way by the system. Not everybody is treated the same way. And there's safeguards that need to be put in there to protect everybody. And sometimes we need to be protected from the prosecutors. I know that the prosecutor, I'm sorry, the former prosecutor in Hartford County, what's his name? Joseph Casilli, he just became disbarred because he was holding favorable evidence. Yeah, exactly. And I would like to know and I'm not asking you this question, Bernice, because it's not your jurisdiction, but I would like to know if the prosecutor in Hartford County is going to prosecute him for that, because that's how we hold people accountable. If he is able to get away with it with just losing his license, then he still has his freedom. He's still walking around. But the people who he withheld evidence from, who got convicted unnecessarily, who might still be in jail, what has that done to their lives?
So, Marylin, I want to commend you for doing all of the work you do. I want to commend Bernice for all the work you do, because there are certain people who sit in certain seats who took that certain class that said, I want to make a difference. It didn't matter whether it be an attorney or an accountant, but they said, I want to make a difference. And you stood by that statement when you said, I want to make a difference. The other thing I think you're doing is you really don't want to be a circuit court judge in Montgomery County, because these people cannot have you talking truth all damn day long. They just are not going to have that. So you might as well keep throwing. You can run, but you're throwing your candidacy out the window. You keep challenging people. So I just put that there. So that's the sad issue.
But we have to. Because the alternative is they run over us even more.
They do.
Because if somebody doesn't stand up and say enough is enough, and we need, I feel so saddened sometimes by what is happening, because people don't realize how much of their rights they are giving away. Pleading guilty to something, or even no contest, or agreeing to probation before judgment,
it's still a record. It's still a record.
It's still a record. It has a devastating effect on your life, down the road. And you see all these young people doing it as well. It's like, well, I just want to get out of the courtroom. No, it's like,
that's
you don't
true.
necessarily want to get out of the courtroom, because you might end up having to spend more time dealing with this matter that you would otherwise be dealing with.
There's another realistic picture here. And last week we shared a little bit about the wealth gap and the economic disparity. And all of this is intertwined because when people are arrested, a lot of them lose their jobs. Let's stay focused here, okay? And if they go to jail, they often will lose their jobs. Let's stay focused here. You know, the other thing is that when you have these situations where even if they plead or if they put, you know, if they plead PBJ, probation before judgment, or Alfred plea, or put it on the stat docket, that's still a charge in the Maryland judiciary case search system. It's not an acquittal, you know. So, you know, and all of this could very well impact somebody's livelihood. You know, how employers look at people that have been charged with such a crime. Some of them will go further than misdemeanor and ask for felony. So if somebody pled to employee felony theft, then, you know, that is very impactful.
Look at all the jobs Maryland has that has contracts with the government, right? We have a tremendous amount of jobs that has some relationship with something with the government because it's a contract. So every contract has to vet an employee. So that's a background check. So think of all the jobs that a lot of Black people or people with charges cannot get because of the background check. So they can never, ever move up their status and economically and a job performance because of this charge they got when they were 20, 18, X years old. And so now they're 35 thinking they can move in, but yet we can't hire you on my contract because I need to background check you and it sees that you were charged. And he says
that's impactful.
Yes.
That's impactful in a magnanimous way. Let's stay focused because you're not going to get all the job opportunities that you necessarily want. And, you know, people are just going to look, you know, employers in particular, they're going to look at you all kinds of ways when you see that type of thing on your record, especially a felony theft.
Yeah.
So, you know, these are serious matters.
Bernadette, you have a question?
My question is, how are prosecutors evaluated for their performances? Is it based on percentage of wins versus what comes to them? Or is it based on strictly prosecuting real crimes as opposed to just, hey, let's get 90% or 100% of what comes before you? How are they evaluated?
Bernice?
Excellent question. And that is going to depend on the top prosecutor and the particular chiefs of the divisions. When I was a prosecutor, we had a couple different ways of being evaluated, and that really depended upon who was leading in that particular division. So I appreciate your question because that is critical. And how I want my prosecutors to be judged is how they're using their judgment. Are they looking at things equitably and fairly? You know, whether it's going to involve also additional training on looking at things in a critical race theory lens. I know it's a hot button phrase, but really getting to the root cause of why these crimes are happening and why the system is even in place, and making sure that we're, like I said, not only doing things equitably, but how are we charging? What plea offers are we offering, and why? Given the information and the evidence that we have at that time. And also dealing with postponements is also another big thing that's kind of like irks me. Like sometimes if you're not quite ready for trial and you create some kind of reason to postpone the case and then comes up, is that really worth the postponement? You know, are you going to ensure this cop's going to be there the next time? Things like that. Really, how are we handling the cases such that we're doing things fairly and equitably to each individual person, and looking at the facts itself and the accused, the age of the accused, the background of the accused, and kind of now doing an analysis of what are the facts that these line prosecutors are looking at before they decide on a plea or how they decide on how to try their case. A lot of it's going to be looking into the psyche of the line prosecutor and how they're thinking. And that's going to involve them really sharing a lot of their thought process in each of these cases. Because I as an elected state's attorney, when I get into that position, I'm not going to be holding their hand. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's a large office. It's a large office, almost 90 people, but it's also going to involve hiring the right leaders in the office to make sure my message gets across to them at the line prosecutor level, in terms of having prosecutors that are really fair and equitable to everyone and culturally competent as well.
Oh, they're going to hate working for you.
Yeah.
I tell you,
I'm pushing back on that.
I'm
pushing back on that because this is the way the system is supposed to work. This is the way it was designed to work.
You guys better get across that cartoon.
So I don't think
they're gonna hate working for her.
Any one of us here is asking for anything different than the way that it was designed.
Bernadette,
there's certain people who have molded it, you know, for their own benefit, but that's exactly the way the system was designed to work, and we want it to work the way it was designed to work.
Well, we know if it's working when she buys a house in Chevy Chase, and then we know, like, okay, if something's wrong. Bernadette, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Ms. North, or I call you Bernice.
Sure. That's fine.
Thank you for running. Thank you for running. Also, Marylin. I appreciate the courage. You know, I have two examples in my family of two women who ran for office. And it's interesting how both examples were learning experiences of how to run a campaign. One member of my family in West Africa and one member in New York. One was successful, one was not elected. As you're running your campaign, I have two questions. First, do you have a short statement on what your platform is? What is your view, and what are you running on? And then the second part of the statement, practically, how is your campaign going right now?
Great questions, and thank you so much for that. So for the first question, I have 4 priorities that are on my website, and that's basically focusing on seeker grade transparency and accountability, not just to the police, but to the prosecutors, for the sake of the public. Finding alternatives to incarceration, and as I mentioned earlier, it's not just about keeping someone out of jail, but keeping someone out of the system to begin with. Because let's not forget, incarceration also can include pretrial detention, which is a whole nother conversation to talk about, right? And the third is what I mentioned earlier about assessing equity and fairness. And that's going to come along with not just how we're evaluating our prosecutors, but how we're going through our cases. And that's why a data analyst is so critical to help us achieve that priority. And lastly, focusing on restoring and really stabilizing communities. And that goes to increasing our attention on victim and witness services. I think that is a big red flag in the office. This county is one of 3 foreign-born. And we just need to have an office, especially in the victim witness section, that reflects that diversity. It is crucial because that disconnect is what leads to desocialization, what leads to the mental health issues, because they don't know what to do in the system. And that's something that I really want to focus on in the office. Now, in terms of the campaign, I have my campaign manager. I see him online right now. And we have about half a dozen interns from the University of Maryland that we just brought on. We're looking to bring on more. And we have a slew of volunteers on the campaign, and we have a few fundraisers coming up. Well, I don't know if I should say this yet, but we are about to have an open house for our campaign office in a few weeks. So very excited about that, because this is a campaign that is truly grassroots. Traditionally, the office has been, go to the mid to large firms, get their, have them max out $6,000 and get your $100,000 in 3 months. But this is really based on the grassroots of Montgomery County. And I'm so lucky to have people that have volunteered their time.
Those white people were never going to give you the money anyway, so don't worry about it. So you can call it grassroots all you want. Those white people are not giving you a dime. Mike Tabor had.
I feel like look at the diversity we have right here. I don't think that's true at all. And also, we forgot to mention that Krista Tishy is also here. She's running for county council.
That's right.
But anyway.
Well, Mike Tabor had a question. Mike Tabor had a question.
Congratulations, Bernice. I wish you the best. I really do.
Thank you so much. Congratulations to you.
Right. Folks, I'm telling you.
What's that?
Actually, I said you'll get very good advice here. I'm telling you from these folks. A lot of good positive input, and it's very beneficial to me to attend and be present. And,
awesome.
I wanted to ask about the expungement. Is there some way we can tie that into maybe helping people that have been incarcerated so that that record doesn't follow them? Are there programs that support this process? So in
there are expungement clinics that are offered by a lot of nonprofits, including bar associations. Voluntary bar associations, such as the J. Franklin Bourne Bar Association, do set up expungement clinics for designed specifically for that purpose.
Okay. And there's also work in Annapolis. I'm not, forgive me, because that's something I have not looked into this session, but I know last year there was a huge push to deal with automatic expungements, and where a prosecutor could fit in that role is really advocating for those tools to allow people to re-enter society without the stigma or without the unnecessary weight of a conviction. So automatic expungements is a big thing in Annapolis, and I know there was also legislation on the unit rule where if you plead to like 1 out of 3 charges, you can't knock the other 3 off your record because you pled to 1 of them. So that's the simplest way of explaining that legislation. But forgive me, I don't know if that actually was reintroduced this session or not, but I know that was last session, not the session before.
Mike Tabor, you have a question, please.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm part of a group of progressive neighbors that started about 20 years ago when an unlikely candidate who had no support from the Democratic Party caused us to mobilize, and that was Jamie Raskin.
Raskin, yeah.
So, it's nice of him, but he gives us some credit in his book, which I'd highly recommend you
great.
take a look at. So, so we're looking for progressive candidates to endorse, and we haven't endorsed anyone yet, but certainly I know I'd be advocating for Brandy Brooks, and of course Marylin, and of course Mark Elrich, but that has to be done collectively and with a lot of research. So in your case, and everything I'm hearing says yes, 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 she's great. So my question is about what Maryland's encountered, the Good Old Boys Network. So that in-group, inside-outside type of group that doesn't necessarily pick the person that's most interested in social justice or justice, period. So I'm curious, in your encounters so far in the legal system, to what extent you've had any relationship, good or bad, with that insider network, and whether or not you have an insight into who they might be eyeing to back. So it's up to you how honest or how knowledgeable you want to be with this group.
Well, no, I appreciate the question, and look, I have lived in Montgomery County. I've been a practicing attorney in Montgomery County. I'm not actively involved in the Bar Association for that reason. I have great deal of respect for all the judges and anyone that decides to serve our community as a lawyer and as a judge, as a public defender. So I always approach people with that level of respect. If that respect is not reciprocated, that doesn't bother me because I know my convictions, I know what's right. And I see what's happening in the community. And what I also notice what's happening in the community is that there's a disconnect between what the community needs and what the traditional legal community is looking for. It is a good old boys network. It will remain so. But I would argue that there are people within the legal community that want to see the change. That's without question. They want to see the change, but it's within the context of the good old boy network. So it's interesting to see that that area of our community kind of trying to grapple with, a racial reckoning. But I've, for me, in my personal experience, I've already grappled with it. I lived it. I'm seeing that. So I'm ready to move us forward. And there's several people in the community that want to move us forward a little bit more than just the inch or two that I'm seeing within the legal community, traditional legal community that looks at this race. I think this is a prime time for us to really be really bold and forward thinking. And I'm so grateful that we have people outside of the legal community that understand that. Even the young folks, I mean, all my interns are like Generation Z. They are hungry for change. They've lived their lives through school shootings and war. They're tired. I hear it in their voices, and they're excited to see someone like me that's stepping up and saying, no, we can change the system. Let's do it. So that's what motivates me to keep going, despite what the legal community and other traditional factions are advocating for this particular position.
And I love that. That is a beautiful summary of your position. And I'm sorry I apologize for interrupting you. And I see Nixon has a question, Evangelist Minor has a question, but there are two things I want to do before we go back to questions.
But we can't.
I hope, Bernice, that you could hang on with us.
We have a hard break. We have a hard break.
At 7, apparently.
We have a hard break. Well done. Yeah, we have a hard recording break for all the people listening to all the airways and things like that. We could stay on if we want, but I do want to do this on air and wish this great man a happy birthday. So I do want to do that.
Could sing happy birthday to Wilbur. That would be great. Tomorrow's Wilbur's birthday, and I don't know if he wants us to say how many
old
years,
he is.
But let's all sing, and everybody, you need to drown me out.
Right. Ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Wilbur. Happy birthday to you.
Congratulations.
And not to take the limelight away from Will, but today is Anita Neal Powell Day. Yes, she does have her own day in Montgomery County, and today is the day that it is celebrated. Today is designated as Anita Neal Powell Day, so we want to wish Anita Neal Powell happy Anita Neal Powell Day.
Thank you, Anita.
Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it, Anita.
I like I said, we don't want to take up too much of Bernice's time. It's up to her if she wants to stay on.
Happy to stay on.
But I will close out the live broadcast and wish everybody we'll be back here next Wednesday. We will have Bernice back on our show along with all our other candidates. So this was a pleasure. This is a joy. So everyone be kind, be compassionate, and be safe. Thank you.